Now, I want to talk about this general named Jehuti, who was under Tutmos III. But if I'm reading the Anunnaki king list correctly, Tutmos III was never pharaoh. But I'll do another video about that. So his story, Jehuti's story, is quite similar to the story about the Trojan horse. Okay, but the Egyptian story is obviously much more believable, right? So that's what I'm saying about the Anunnaki king list that the Sumerians gave us, right? So with the Jehuti story, that was passed off in Greece. They took that story and they changed it a bit, and then there's people who believe that it came from that location. But it didn't come from that location, it came from Egypt. But it was transferred over there. They changed the story a bit, and people believe that it's from that location, but it's not. That's what I'm saying with the Anunnaki king list. The Sumerians created the Anunnaki king list, and they're actually talking about the ancient Egyptians. But anyway, I'm going to let you listen to the story about Jehuti.
A cunning general. Even on those rare occasions when neither the pharaoh nor one of the other gods was the chief protagonist, every tale naturally redounded to the king's great credit. One of the more entertaining tales concerned the ruse de guerre used to Jehuti, a general of Thutmose III, to capture the city of Joppa, present-day Jaffa in Canaan. One account of this rebellion, written many years later, was to a large extent fictional. A revolt had taken place in Joppa, and not for the first time. During the course of his reign, Thutmose fought numerous campaigns in the area. Clearly, it was imperative to bring the city to heel at once. Thutmose, unable to leave Egypt, sent instead his resourceful general Jehuti, entrusting him with the royal mace as a sign of the powers that had been delegated to him. When the general reached Joppa, he was daunted by the city's towering walls. Reluctantly, he ordered an all-out assault, which resulted in heavy Egyptian losses, with nothing to show for them. So the general decided to try cunning against his opponents. He sent a formal letter to the prince, once more demanding surrender. Attached to the official scroll, however, he added a private message. It was clear that he could not take the city, wrote the general, and he was much afraid of the consequent wrath of Thutmose. Therefore, for a handsome bribe, he would change sides. Perhaps the prince would agree to meet to discuss terms with him. The prince, who ought to have known better, was willing to compromise. Under a flag of truce, the two men discussed matters amicably. Then the prince asked if he could see the famous mace. In the privacy of the general's tent, he produced the great symbol of authority. But the prince did not have long to marvel at the mace before the general knocked him unconscious, using the exquisite treasure as a weapon. While some of his men bound the luckless ruler, the general told the prince's servants that he had prepared many gifts for Joppa to display where his new loyalties lay. The gifts were impressive and numerous. They filled 200 large baskets, each carried by 2 unarmed men. The people of Joppa opened their gates to allow the tribute to enter. Once inside, however, the trap was sprung. From each basket leapt an Egyptian soldier, carrying extra weapons on behalf of his 2 bearers. Within minutes, the Egyptian force had seized the gates, and the rest of the general's men flooded through to victory. In due course, the city's booty and its fettered prince were brought to Egypt, and the king's ingenious general was heaped with rewards.
So the Egyptian story makes a lot more sense than the Greek story. And sometimes we have to ask ourselves, when they're talking about Greeks, are they really talking about the ancient Egyptians? I have to, think that now. So that's what I'm saying. You could take a story from one location and put it in another, and then people are going to interpret it that it's from that location when it's not from that location, it's from another location. And then, then they could change the story the way they see fit. Like people hiding in a horse. Like they took the horse back to their palace and they left it there, and then all of a sudden they came out. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous story. Obviously, the Egyptian story makes a lot more sense. But that's what I'm saying with the Anunnaki king list, right? The Anunnaki king list is from the Sumerians. The Sumerians are talking about the ancient Egyptians. They're talking about their first dynasty when they came on the scene. And it makes sense if the Sumerians are after the ancient Egyptians, which I believe that they are. Because, as I said, like, we only talk about basically the ancient Egyptians. We don't talk about Sumerians because they're not an ancient civilization like the ancient Egyptians. I believe that Sumerians are an offshoot of the ancient Egyptians, and they would have their stories because there's people that came from ancient Egypt and they settled elsewhere, and that's where they settled.